Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 71 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, the podcast where we shine a light on the storytellers, the creatives, and the voices behind the camera. This week, I'm joined by media professional turned podcaster Michael Klassen. We talk his career in media, from broadcast television and video production, to how this enhanced his storytelling skills and the inception of the 5am podcast, where he's dedicated to helping listeners thrive through purposeful early rising, cultivating gratitude, and developing an abundance mindset. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to stay connected, all my links are in the About section, from socials, merch, website, and much more. Hitting follow, sharing the show, or leaving a quick rating really helps Behind the Camera grow. Now, here's the interview. Michael, welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are we doing today?
Doing great. It's a lovely Friday that we're recording this on, and it's a great day to be alive.
Absolutely, as is every day, my friend. So so you are media professional, but you now host the 5am podcast. So can you take us back to your career in media and how you became media professional and leading into podcasting?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it'll start when I was really young, because I loved watching television. We lived in a small farming community, had just 2 or 3 channels, and there wasn't a lot of variety. So we watched sports because that's one of the few things my parents would give the stamp of approval to. And I loved it. And then I found out about video cameras, and my mom was an avid photographer as we were growing up with a still camera. And then I found out from her brother that there was video cameras. And actually, probably earlier than that, we were at a wedding north of our farm in a small town at this church. My parents knew the people involved with that, and we were there. I was very young, and I have this imprint burned in my mind of my dad's friends showing my dad and me this video film camera that he had just bought, and I was mesmerized by this black contraption that had film in it. And I was like, wait a second, you mean this thing captures images like what we see on the screen? And so then you go through school and you get to do video assignments instead of written paper assignments. And we had transparencies, these, the light boxes that would shine the image up. And so on the screen, I should say. And so this particular one that my teacher had, you would scroll the acetate through on this reel. And so I wrote down my closing credits even for my class project on this acetate, and I was video recording the projection up on the wall. And I thought I was like, George Lucas, eat your heart out, buddy. I'm coming for you. So I didn't get into film, but I got into TV and produced a music video show with Christian artists. That was the music I was into in my teenage years. And did that for 4 seasons, did it while I was in college. And then I just kept on trucking. I enjoyed it. I had an aptitude for it. I guess because of my upbringing, I had an aptitude for control and organization. And that worked very well for working behind the camera, producing productions and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Yeah, I absolutely love the kind of immediate fascination with like seeing the video cameras, because like it takes me back to like, whenever I was a kid, and it was always like the big massive, and they had like the attachment on them where you had to look through like the lens to, and then whenever they released the ones where you could just look at the screen that flipped out, then just the evolution of it was just incredible. And so then whenever you then sort of started working then in TV and then producing things, that must have been like a whole new like world for you compared to like, say, what you had grown up with.
Yes, it was much different. I remember my dad coming. I was volunteering at a TV station in our community cable channel, and so there was this punk rock music video playing and they had a TV screen right when you entered the building. And I remember my dad coming to pick me up and watching him. Here's this farmer butcher by trade fellow looking at this punk music video and kind of like, what is my son getting himself into? And the couple guys that mentored me in those early years, chain smoking DJ type, just fun characters to be around,
Hmm.
and a polar opposite, not a polar opposite, but a bit opposite of, a Christian upbringing, which, we were all fine with. I mean, we didn't, in our
Yeah.
home, that didn't really bother us, people's choices and proclivities. We knew that it's all up to the individual. But um, and then just going to college, getting that 4-year degree, and then trying to find work. And there was a lot of part-time gigs, just finding, scrapping for whatever you could find in television production to get that experience and get those hours in. And then 10 years after graduation, I got my first full-time on the payroll benefit type job.
Yeah.
And what a value that was.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think it's one of those things where when you start out into it, having that kind of passion for it and being interested in how it works and
Mm,
seeing something come together like in front of your eyes, like that's kind
yeah.
of, a big sort of step ahead because the everyone knows the film and TV industry is like one of the most difficult to get
Yes.
into. Like you really have to kind of before you step foot in anywhere, you have to have like an extensive portfolio, both quantitative and qualitative as well.
Well, for us, it was a little bit different. Here in Canada, we had these cable stations, and so
Hmm.
they would bring a lot of people on and teach the craft to it. But there came a point where you realized you were on a call list and you had to say yes, regardless of the time. And so with the union rep would call, and I built some relationships with some of these guys, and one of them, on who was actually on staff, um had said, "Oh yeah, people are asking why you're always around." And I said, "Well, it's because when Gary calls, I pick up the phone and say, yes, I'll be right there. When do you need me? 11 o'clock? No problem. PM? Okay. Put it on the calendar, Gary."
Yeah.
And that's the commitment that it takes, of everyone knowing that, like, in, let's say, in the household, let's say in that orbit, that I was building something at the time, and I had to say yes. If I was going to build something, I had to say yes, which meant I had to say no to other things. It gets a little lonely sometimes, but you have to build that
Yeah.
portfolio like you're talking about, not just because you really are only as good as your last production. I learned that the hard way sometimes. But not only do you have to have the right attitude of being the tool where they put you, the other part is you have to develop your craft and your eye, and understand that you need to develop your own set of skills,
Yeah.
that you will volunteer to be the Swiss Army knife on any production, and you'll say goodbye to ego, because that just comes with the territory. So you got to be protective against that. But you're absolutely right about the quality and the quantity
Mhm.
in that portfolio.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of like people I've spoken to who either have or do work in film and TV, like one thing that they've said that all in common is you have to be versatile because especially when you're starting out and if you only have like one particular set role because either that's all you've been trained to do or hired to do, you
Mhm.
have to make yourself available to like learn all of the other sort of crafts I suppose that you can, and then that's kind of another way to step forward in that, whether it be kind of like man in a rig or something, or even in one case that I had stunt work, just kind of somebody spoke to just randomly got into stunt work because they needed someone and he was readily available in the studio.
Mhm. And it is that, like, I was taught, I mentioned the word humility already once already, but I'll mention it again, because you have to be able to say, I will admit to knowing nothing about this, and I will humble myself before you, so that you can teach me how to do this the correct way. And that work. I've worked on union sets. I've worked on non-union sets. Union are way better from in my personal, just from how the rules of it,
Yeah.
and IATSE is, it's a powerful, a good organization, I think, for stage workers and theater workers and film. And it was just such a blessed time. But I learned a lot of character and understanding why you want to be in the roles where they put you. It had been said to me, "Hey, we'd love to use you over here, but Michael, this is where I need you.
Yeah.
So up to the sucky job, you get to go." And I'd be like, "Okay." But you know what? They gave me better and better jobs as I learned, as they saw that, hey, Michael's willing to get get the dirty job done and to learn and to admit. I worked as I grew in the craft and the trade. You get different kinds of people with different attitudes, very well educated people that have no experience. And I had asked one guy to light this two-person interview shoot that we were doing in the sports locker room, and he was like completely presenting himself as someone who could easily light this interview set. And I was like, great. I'm really glad I got an experienced guy here. That's good. So I went and did my stuff as kind of the field producer. And I came back and I saw his lighting set up, and I just like bowed my head for a moment. Was like, oh, okay, well, let's go over a couple of things. We just we just have to make a few changes to your setup. And he wasn't around for very long because he didn't like his weaknesses getting pointed out to him.
Yeah.
That was my take from it. But yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and like to use that word humility again, like like you say, you have to sort of accept these things. You have to accept like if there's any flaws in your work, you're in a production that needs to be as as close to, if not perfect. And it is such a fascinating thing. And one thing that I've learned from people as well is that no matter what you do, you are always seen regardless. Now, people talk about it being such a
Mhm.
cutthroat industry, and as much as it is, but like if you are willing to do all of the sort of the donkey work, as it were, that nobody wants to
Yes,
do, then they're the people who do actually kind of, they get to sort of get more experience. They get to kind of, they have more longevity, I suppose you could say, in the industry.
absolutely. And the I can now speak from experience on the other side too of when you see someone who's Johnny on the spot and willing to put the time in and willing to say no to distractions and get the work done, man, those men and women become valuable
Hmm.
people. And also too, I've been on the proofing side, where you proof your daily show and you send it back to the editors. Well, they're learning what the expectations are, and kind of the unwritten style guide. Journalists could get a book that was the style guide for what they were doing. When my wife was a journalist for a newspaper, and there was a style guide. Would I try and write? No, because I can't follow those rules, man. I'm in film and television, and then there's their own set of rules.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's what a delight.
Oh, it's incredible. So then obviously, after leading on from your career in media, now you now host the 5 a.m. podcast, which I believe started as a blog. So what can you
Yeah.
tell us then about the podcast itself, like how it came to be and what the journey in podcasting has been like for you?
Oh, yes. Well, I'll start off with giving props to Napoleon Bonaparte, because he said leaders are dealers in hope. And when my wife and I were starting 5ampodcast.com, 2019, we needed some hope. And we knew there was a verse in the Bible that says, "He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." And so we just put the word hope in there. So he who gives hope to others will himself receive hope. And it's a tale as old as time, right? And so we thought, hey, we've got this idea for a blog. We would eventually like to have a podcast, because I was an absolute, I still am, love podcasts all daily, we'll say. And so we started 5ampodcast.com, and we thought we don't have the equipment yet and the time to do the audio visual side. So let's start writing articles, and let's just see if we can we follow through on this for 6 months. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes follow through is a little hard. And
Yes.
we've got all those fleshly appetites that we can follow through on. But sometimes when we're building something, it's like that 80-20 rule. We can blast through the easy 80%, and then all of a sudden we come to that 20%, and we're like,
Yep.
oh man, I got to dig deep for this, even 5%. And so we started doing that. I was working in television at the time, and that was very fulfilling. And so I wasn't doing side work or anything like that, but we were still focused on building 5ampodcast.com on the for the audio visual of what it is today. And so when we had extra money, we'd buy a good microphone, and we'd buy a few other things as we went along. And then my position as a senior broadcast producer was terminated in October of
Mm.
24. And I already had an inkling that something was going on. Even a few months before that, I had this sense that something was coming. And so, I would say that God's Spirit, the Holy Spirit, was preparing me for what was ahead. As everybody likes the heads up. So we knew that something was coming, and so we were still, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Rich Man's Secret, talks about just taking the next thing, just take the next step. Don't worry, don't look down the road, just take the next step. And I came home. I had already texted my wife or called her up and said, "Hey, here's what happened." And she's like, "Okay, well, that's good. We'll execute the next phase of the plan." And so it took us a few months, and we started mid-January of 25. So we've got over 100 episodes so far, and you and I met on Podmatch,
Yeah.
and that's been a great
That's
source
incredible.
of guests. I mean, this show would not be what it is without podmatch.com, that's for sure.
Oh, I can completely attest to that. Like, it is such an incredible service. But that's honestly, that's like such an incredible story there, because it's almost as if you were meant to take that next step at that moment
Yes.
in time. It's like it was just meant to be. You'd put in all this work for the better part of 5+ years, and then it was like, now was the right time.
Yes.
And like, I mean, 100 episodes in under a year, like, that's absolutely incredible. And surely there's like a great sort of message to sort of be received from that. So the format of your podcast focuses on like early rising, gratitude, and abundance mindset. So could you talk us through like the background of that? Like, what was the sort of inspirations for doing the podcast based around these themes?
Well, I grew up on a farm, so we always had early mornings. We could not opt out of chores and being a good steward, being a good the whole mentality of generational farmers, but also generational like Protestant Christians who had
Mhm.
this idea of stewardship and responsibility. And like my parents would never give us a curfew; they gave us responsibilities.
Mhm.
You can stay out as late as you want, but just remember, you're getting up because you have chores to do, and they're better to do them well rested than tired, as we discovered through trial and error. And so that was a big part of it. But also I worked a lot in politics, in behind the scenes as a volunteer, and in doing video and television and stuff like that. You're going to run into the politicians and the people that sit at the city gates,
Yeah,
and boy, that can be a very caustic atmosphere.
I'm sure. I'm
And
sure.
so we wanted the opposite of that. How do we encourage people, and how do we help, put some wind in people's sails? And then um, when we first started doing the audio visual side of 5am podcast, we knew that we wanted people to come to 5am podcast because they would leave with something that would help them along life's path.
Yeah.
So an experience that somebody was have someone overcame an addiction to maybe food or pharmaceuticals, somebody overcame an illness, or they like Paul Tremmell, fellow that left, sold everything, lives on a sailboat in the Panama or the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And what a story he had of meaning, of not only kicking his addictions and working through that, but becoming a successful author and then setting goals for himself and being able to achieve and accomplish things that his 20 years ago or 10 years ago he would have thought is impossible. And so that's what we want people to take away from 5am podcast is there's a lot of people who maybe had it better or worse than me, but they had a goal and they just kept taking the next thing, the next step, just walking forward. And you find faith and you find strength and resilience, and you realize that I had a very profound conversation with someone named Urmi Hussein, and she was talking about how she came to this realization that she had to actually make friends with her fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, a lot of us struggle with fear and the unknown, but
Yeah.
to realize that your fear is actually telling you, this is where the deficiency lies. Okay, thank you. Now I can repair that spot. I can work on that. I can strengthen that muscle. And, working a lot with athletes in my past, I saw the benefits of strengthening those muscles and that resistance training and that discipline. And boy, those are just rules and metaphors for every aspect of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really fascinating, especially when you get to hear people's different perspectives on how they've either overcome addiction or they've managed to take that next step. Because like the way I kind of like to look at life is that everybody has their own story, everybody has their own way of doing things, and if it comes to the same result,
Hmm.
amazing. But it's the getting there is the really kind of fascinating part. Like, and would you say that you've had like lots of different guests who have maybe dealt with like the things like addiction or fear, but
Hmm.
in different ways?
Oh yes, and I would say there's different paths, there's different destinations that people want to get to, and different difficulties or demons that people want to overcome. But we find out through it all that um, it's about the experience, not the
Mm-hmm.
outcome.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest takeaway from the hundreds of people, but at least 100 people that we've talked to, that it's been, you realize, oh, it's not about getting the brass ring. It's not about finding the goose that lays the golden egg. It's actually the experience of getting to that spot, because we can't have, there's no overnight success. We can't have that overnight success because we'll squander the rewards of it. But when we put the hard work in and we pay our dues and we realize that we have to walk in humility and say no to certain things that the flesh craves, right? So that we can come out the other side and say, now that I've got the rewards for the fruit of my labor, now I know the true price that I had to pay to acquire that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's almost important for like people to sort of adapt that mindset where they have to kind of work for rewards because, well, it's
Hmm.
like the prodigal son kind of comes to
Yes.
mind, when you look at it that way. Because I know, and I think most people would kind of sort of live both lifestyles. They will work, but they will also kind of
Yeah.
short term gain, and then squander, and then keep going in a
Mhm.
cyclical kind of way. And sometimes people do find happiness with that, I guess, but at the same time, like how truly rewarding must that really be if you're always having to kind of constantly, you'll never be fulfilled is kind of
That's
where I'm
right.
going with that, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Always having to do the course correction. And, we used to sing that song as children. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just going in a circle, and you're fulfilling the appetites of the flesh and the I want it now and what's in it for me. And then you realize, oh, we used that all up. It didn't satisfy. Now I have to go through that whole process again. Instead of finding out that the process is the fulfilling part. And then when the rewards come, uh, that's that's kind of almost like an auxiliary payoff
Yeah.
because of how we've been transformed through the process.
Mm-hmm. So then how might one then sort of come out of that mindset and just really kind of be like, right, I need to put the work in here because then that way I have a sort of lifetime of happiness and
Yeah,
whatever comes with that. Like, how does somebody come out of the mindset to work towards that?
boy. That is an excellent question because we all have the opportunity to respond to something. And, at the time that we're recording this, we've just gone through Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, Armistice Day, those times of remembrance of terrible, terrible times. And we cannot fathom. There's no video game that could even help us or movie to even compare to what the let's say the Axis and Allies went through
Mhm.
during World War I and World War II. The reason that I want to bring that up is because of the ultimate sacrifice that so many people and families um, had to endure.
Yeah.
And even on the Russian side too, you see tours of Russia, small towns that are they have no people in them, and they have these enormous monuments to, like, 95% of the community was killed during one of the world wars. The reason that I want to bring that up, a little bit of homage to the sacrifice that people paid, but that idea that we have to make the decision if we're going to sign up to that life assignment of who we can become and where we could go, and think of that those those people who fought in those wars and other wars were not just doing it for themselves. Maybe they were conscripted, maybe they were not happy to be there. I can't imagine anyone wanting to be happy to be there, but they're doing it for the future generations. There's a friend, an acquaintance, I'll say, whose great grandfather uh, died in World War II. He had 10 children, and there was one in the womb,
Wow.
and so he passed away never seeing his 11th child. And that kind of sacrifice, I guess, taking it out of the grim war memorial time of a man plants a tree for the next 4 generations. Someone might plant a fruit tree that they'll never eat the fruit of, but it's not
Yeah.
about them. It's about the generations to come. And we can get so focused on ourselves and the struggle that we go through, we forget that we're actually doing this for the generations to come as much as we're doing it, or more than we're doing it for ourselves. So we like the payoff. We have the struggle, and we know that we can do something for the generations that are yet to come.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at it, but what is the why, the motivating force? Why are you going to put yourself through the resistance training? Why are you going to say no to food that you shouldn't be eating, but it tastes really good and your body craves it? And why? Why are you going to do that? And so once we have our motivating factor, then we can say, okay, I can move forward with this because I see the result that I want. And we often say on 5 a.m. podcast, if we do common things, we'll get common results. If we do uncommon things, we'll get uncommon results.
Yeah. That's like when you boil it down like that, like it's sort of, it really does make it sound like so simple. And it's because it just fascinates me because obviously every single person is motivated by something, no matter what
Mhm.
it might be. We're all motivated by something, but I think only like a smaller percentage of people actually will act on these things. Like, for example,
Correct.
like I've kind of gone in circles with that sort of thing, and my own personal life. Like
Yeah.
I've been in shape, out of shape, this, that,
Yeah.
and the other. And like I want to do things, and then just kind of maybe not really fully following through. And like, do you feel that like whenever people kind of generally get into that sort of way, would it be a case where once they get the reward, it's either not as fulfilling as they thought it might be,
Mhm.
or there might still be work to do, or even just a case of they don't even know what the reward is?
Yes. And it's like the process is the reward, not
Mm-hmm.
not the pile of treasure at the end. And when we think in terms of why am I doing this and what do I want to get out of this, it has to be something more than just the shiny objects.
Yeah.
And um, one of my mentors in television production struggled with alcoholism. I mean, he didn't struggle with it; his family struggled with the
Mm,
results of his alcoholism. But he said, I would say I'm going to quit for my wife or for my sons or for something else. And he said, it was never effective until I realized I had to do it for myself.
yeah.
And so we have to decide. Well, I guess we could take breaks from our mission We could give ourselves a furlough if we want, but we have to know our why, what's our motivating factor, and then what do we actually want to get out of it? And know that there's more spiritual or mental things that we're going to get out of it, and those will satisfy much more than the shiny objects or the brass ring that we get. I've interviewed Olympians, and they work really, really hard, and it might be let's say an adolescent into those early 20s and 30s, but then eventually they age out of
Yeah.
being that athlete, and maybe they have a gold or a silver or bronze medal. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, another 4 years, I could compete again, but I'm going to go from 22 to 26. Boy, do I want to have to put in the effort that I've done over these last 12 or 15 years to get this medal, and then what do I do? And that's why we get medals, we get these accolades, but they're kind of like the auxiliary reward,
Yeah.
because how we've changed as a person, that's the real takeaway for it. And do
Oh.
we like who that is? Maybe we don't like who that is.
But it's so true, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying before about it's the journey is kind of like what kind of shapes the people in terms of
Yes.
what they're doing. Because I know myself, I've done so many different things over the course of my life, and
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
podcasting is probably the one that has stuck the most in terms
Hmm.
of consistency and longevity and just general passion, which is nice. And I didn't come into that until I was 30, which
Hmm.
like we talk about aging out, and like, but there are some things that you simply don't age out of. Sometimes people
Yes.
will just kind of find their call, and they'll have that kind of mental clarity that this is what they enjoy doing, what they feel like they're meant to be doing at uh, any age. Like for example,
Yes.
whenever I was in university, I was in a class with people in their 50s because they decided that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make something of it, whether it be for 5, 10 years, or even not at all, but that was the goal at that point in time, like just the short-term goals. And I like
Mm.
the sort of what you say about the Olympian as well, like the difference between 22 and 26. It's one of those things where it's like, well, years in sports are like dog years, well, for a
Yes, that's
start,
right. Yeah, totally.
but then at the same time, like it goes in the flash. Like you'd be 22, but then blink and you're all of a sudden 26. It's really
Yeah.
kind of what have you done in that time? Like sometimes I would say for me personally that my life began at 26, just
Mhm.
because I look back and think, well, what did I do beforehand? And it's just such a fascinating topic for me, the whole mental clarity behind
Yeah.
well, I suppose it's more mindfulness really about the journey that you're on, isn't it? Rather than kind of the clarity
Oh.
of it. It's like you understand that you're going somewhere, but that's the sort of first step of it. Then it's like kind of,
Mhm.
okay, where am I going? Why am I going there? What do I need to do to get there? And like you kind of just build it up as you go along. The things change, and it's it. And you could go down a rabbit hole with all that, of course, but
Oh,
like it
yes.
is just such a fascinating topic,
It is. And knowing who you're going with on the journey, and saying yes to people and no to people.
Yeah.
And also to uh the political rhetoric that's around us, and the time vampires, the energy vampires who are around us, and finding the people that want to head in the same direction. There's people who just want to be 9 to 5ers,
Yeah.
living in the office cubicle, and if that's what you want, I'm happy for you. If you feel like you're executing on your best and what you think, where you see yourself in 20 or 30 years. But there's those other people that they're reaching for the stars, and they know that life is what they make it. And so each day we make our life what we want it to be, and we find out what works and what doesn't. But uh, it is that whole mindfulness of knowing that, boy, there's a lot of raging lions and chirping, peacocks all around me, and I have to stay focused away from those distractions of dis-ease and fear and other all those negativities, like the heavy D's, right?
Mhm.
Discouragement, disappointment, all of those unpleasant words. And so when we find people that lift us up and build us up, which is what we try to do at 5am podcast, because we know that, boy, that can be a real challenge sometimes to find, um, yeah, to find not just the diamond in the rough and what we're looking for and the great treasure, that we find a pearl in a field and we sell everything we have because we know that that pearl is the thing to hold on to.
Yeah.
And then the things of life come along, and we just have to say, why am I doing this? And if I have this vision for the future, then I can shed things that I feel like are holding me back, and I can gain things that I feel like are going to help me get there.
Yeah.
And I have a woodworking shop not that far, just over that way. But boy, I've hardly been in there at all in this last year because we've just been so focused on 5am podcast that I know that that shop is going to be there. The tools are going to be there. I can go back out there. But right now, this is what I need to be focused on. And same thing for my wife as well. She's able to work from home. And so we get to work together on building what 5am podcast is.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that kind of mindfulness that sort of, it kind of adds a bit more assurance into the things that sometimes like self doubt will creep in, where you
Mhm.
have these things and it's like, am I just sort of neglecting this, something that I was like so passionate about before? Am I neglecting it? But then at the same, it's like you say, it's, oh no, it's still there. You can go back to it, whether it's a case of when the time is right, when
Mhm.
you find the time, or because I mean, I think I do think sometimes that like we all do have the time to sort of go back to other kind of passions like that, but sometimes
Mhm.
you just want to take time to switch off. Sometimes you just
Yes.
do want to take that. And like I think it's like really interesting because sometimes I think that you can take that next step in your journey without really even kind of knowing that it was a step to take, whether it just be doing something different. For example, like for me, and this is kind of related to the topic of early rising, to do with 5am podcast as well. So like on now I don't like the term morning person, not a morning person, because I don't
Uh-huh.
really truly believe it to be, I believe it's a bit of a construct. But
Mhm.
that aside, on a weekend, on a Saturday and Sunday, I love being awake early.
Yeah.
But do I do it? More often than not, I sleep in late, and I will get relatively annoyed at myself for doing so. But there are so many times that I have like, this is like before my wife and I got married. Before she moved in with me, we would have like, she would have come down on the weekend sometimes, and would have been like a Saturday morning. My wife loves she loves to sleep in, like it was like, and I'm just like, more power to you, totally fine. Um, but there was one time I was just kind of lying. And I was like, right, I'm gonna get up. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. It's like, and I got up, went to the gym, went for a walk, and got a coffee, and then went and got my car washed. And I was home by around 11, half 11 in the morning. And I get home, my wife's still there, lying in bed. Like she's awake at this point, but still.
Mhm.
And I was just like, I looked and I was like, we've both had a relatively successful morning, and that is like, it was one of the most sort of satisfying feelings that I've had. That it was like, our journeys in that moment were different, but
Yeah.
it, it was the sort of, it marked what was going to be a good day, sort of thing. And like,
Right.
it's, but like, it's just doing those little things, having that kind of time just for yourself, for example, just to do
Mhm.
something out of the ordinary, or something that you say you want to do but never acting on it, kind of. It's yeah, like it just
Yeah.
is. So now that I say that, I have to start doing that. Now that I've said this in like a public forum, I have to live up to
Uh,
this now, and this is gonna be the evidence that I have to.
yeah. Well, here's something else that it kind of struck me like a ton of bricks when I heard it. Of course, we have 52 weeks out of the year,
Mm-hmm.
which means we have 52 weekends every year. So if you live to be 100, you get 5,200 weekends. And I'm thankful for weekends. But then it just helps us to put things in perspective of, what do I want this weekend to be for me?
Yeah.
What do I want this early morning or this late morning to be for me. And it's just a great way for us, in my mind, um, to understand the value of a day and the value of our time, and to know that, boy, it really, we are so fortunate that our time is up to us. You know,
Oh
we're not controlled by the tyranny of tyrannical government or dictators. That other people had
yeah.
their whole times and structures uh, really conscripted away from them, and we have this opportunity to build something beautiful. I think uh, by ourselves or together, and what a blessing that is, really, to have the autonomy to. Um, and the luxury, really, of knowing that we have the authority over our time and our day to do with it as we please.
Yeah, of course. And, I think like to tie that back to then the 5 a.m. podcast as well, like obviously that fits in with the theme of gratitude as
Mhm.
well, because
Yeah. Oh,
I,
man.
I certainly think that our free time is really something that like us as humans take for granted most of the time, or some
Yes.
of the time. Regardless, I don't think there's any one person who's never done it at least once.
Yeah.
Because, and do you feel like there needs to be some kind of like discipline at the same time as there maybe sort of good fortune in terms of like taking that
Mhm.
next step and then being, when you realize, oh wow, had I not done this, things could be, back to square one sort of thing.
Oh, yes. And that whole idea of being grateful for what we have. There's been times where you got to work three jobs. You
Yeah.
you leave at 5 to get on site by 6, and you go from that part-time job to another job, and then you go to another one in the evenings, and you're running ragged, but you know that now, the iron's hot. You got to strike it.
Hmm.
And now you can be grateful for the stress of that and grateful for the income of that. But then you think of how many generations ago, let's say 3 or 4 generations ago, think back to my family in Friesland, that they basically had an agrarian lifestyle. They had to work from pretty much sun up to sundown. I guess, thank the Lord, they had the Sabbath, the Sunday, in their Christian tradition to have that day of rest. But we're so fortunate to have leisure time and leisure vehicles and leisure activities, and we've got central heat.
Yeah.
And at the time of the Romans and Jesus Christ, around his time, the Romans actually had in-floor heat. They
Really?
had terracotta tiles. They'd build this masonry foundation, and they'd have inlets or outlets on the side, and they'd have fireplaces on the end, and then they would build their clay tile floor over top of this maze that the heat would travel through. And so the hot air would come in, and it would be drawn out through the middle part of the floor to the outside. So can you
I
believe
never knew
that
that.
they had so Julius Caesar would have had in-floor heat in their buildings.
Wow.
And fast forward to our maybe our grandparents or great grandparents, no central heat, no central cooling
Yeah.
in their houses. And so what a blessing it is to have all these modern conveniences that do things for us that our ancestors could not even have imagined. And so, yeah, what a blessed time and opportunity that we have to innovate, to tell stories, to help people along life's path. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely. Like everybody's path is different as well. But I'm blown away by the in floor heating. Like
yes.
genuine. I never like no, it's a thing. It's a thing here in the UK. I don't know how like common or popular it is in the UK, but like I did not think because what's amazing is the fact that like 2,000 years ago, and then nothing for the better part
Yes.
of another 2,000 years. Like
Yes. Right.
that is incredible. And but I 100%. It kind of just shows, when you look at people like our ancestors going back hundreds of years, how different life was. But
Hmm.
you know, you could argue they hardly had any problems almost because when you break it down, life was almost at its simplest because it was just routine. There
Hmm.
was definitely a lot less than what we have today at our leisure. Like we have so much that we can do, and attention spans are dwindling Like that's kind of
Yes.
no secret. Attention spans are dwindling to the point now where a lot of people rely on short form content, and I'll admit I'm one of those
Yes.
people sometimes
Oh
too, you
yeah.
know. And
Totally.
it's just it is just sometimes though at the same time, like you kind of have to still kind of live with the times almost, you know.
Hmm. Yes.
But like yeah, like just sort of the it's like sort of how fast, especially over the last 50 to 60 years, how fast people have evolved and what's evolved within people is kind of, you know, fascinating to me because when you hear people's stories, take for example, you know, you mentioned a war veteran whose father was killed in the
Hmm.
First World War. Like that's sort of how much is different, how much was different for that person from when they were born to now, and the stories people have to tell. Like it yeah, it is just like, and I mean I am an absolute sucker for storytelling because I just think it's such a powerful thing. You learn so much about everybody's journey being different, how they took that next step.
Yes. And I think that has been, I know people will blame the demise of Hollywood on the Covidius Maximus that we had going on. But um, to be fair, people realized, oh, I don't need those made up stories. And
100%.
podcasts have come, and this is like what our grandparents would have done on a Sunday afternoon in the pub.
Yeah,
Somebody playing the piano,
absolutely.
and people coming in and sharing their stories and experiences. And that's what podcasts are. Podcasts are that idea of being able to share our stories and experiences. And people would come into the coffee shop or the diner or the pub, and maybe there'd be a stranger in town, and I would think, based on my understanding, is they too could come in and share in the music and the laughter and dancing, and and share a story and an experience. I mean, think of our good friend Geoffrey Chaucer and the Knight's Tales of that. You know, just those stories of traveling minstrels and storytellers. Um, and we're probably gilding the lily maybe a little more than it is, but that's, I think that's the feature advantage and benefit of
Oh
podcasting,
yeah.
is people just sharing their stories and someone saying, ah, I don't have to be camera ready. I can be me ready. I can just sit and take it in.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah, advertisers will still find us.
Hopefully.
Yes,
But
that's
yeah,
great.
of course. Though, but that's the thing. You couldn't have put it any better. And I think that's what podcasting is. It's the closest thing to the traveling minstrel, isn't it? Like
Yes,
just
it
you
is.
know, it's the closest thing, and it is just. I mean, I have not met a single podcaster who wasn't grateful for the fact that they had a podcast. Like
Oh, yes.
genuinely speaking, because
Mhm.
even if you have one person listening, one
Yeah.
person rating you, giving you feedback, or takes anything away from what either yourself or a guest has had to say,
Mhm.
it honestly just makes it so much worth it. Like it's just there's like so much power to it, and it is. I mean, I know for myself, that's why I said it's the probably the one thing that I've definitely stuck at that I can plan on continuing to stick
Mhm.
at, and I'm sure that's the same for yourself as well, especially in the
Absolutely.
first 12 months. And it is like you like you get grateful for like being able to like chat to people like yourself, because we would we have ever had this conversation otherwise. That's one of those things. It's
Yep.
like you get to meet so many amazing people from all over the world with different stories, and in a when kind of in a time when things are sort of so like bleak in the world, all you hear about is like the worst possible things because outlets need to make a headline. Why
Yes.
not just tune into a podcast to hear a nice story about
Yes.
somebody's actual life?
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, one of the first ones we did, we were, um, and this was connected through Podmatch. Jessica L. Morris is her name, and she talked about her addictions and
Mhm.
abusive upbringing. And we were a very small channel at the time. We didn't have a big following. We put it up on our YouTube channel, and within, I don't know, the algorithms did their work. So we'll say within less than 5 hours, we had a comment of somebody saying, "I really needed to hear this today."
Wow.
And this was like, wow, we went kind of deep. Like she was talking about her issues with suicide and addiction, and then to find out some stranger found it and said, wow, this is like what I needed. And what a blessing that is. And man, I pray to God I can do 5 a.m. podcast along with Susan until the day we're getting our ticket punched and taking the one-way train out of here, like it's that people talk about ride or die. So podcast or die, man.
Yes, absolutely. Words to live and die by. Well, yes, Michael, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Thank you so much for your time. I would just like to give you the floor to let the listeners know where can we find you.
Oh, yes. Well, the best spot, 5ampodcast.com. We're on all the usual suspects when it comes to social media. So you can find us on the YouTubes and Instagram and TikTok and X, that cesspool of disagreement. And, we can take joy in it all and know that we are all in this together. And there's far more things that unify us than are trying to pull us apart. And so if we think of light and love, and of course my moral compass is my Christian upbringing, Jesus Christ and all that, everybody has maybe a different North Star and moral compass, but when we all those good things, there's no laws against all the good things, so we can love and bring light and peace to each other and work together in that positive mindset.
What an incredible message. And once again, Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We'll have to do it again. The only thing we're missing is pints. We didn't have any pints.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And there you have it. That brings us to the end of episode 71 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Huge thank you to Michael Klassen for being this week's guest and sharing his story. He really offered a very refreshing and unique perspective into storytelling, gratitude, and how mindfulness really takes us far. Once again, if you'd like to stay connected and support the podcast, drop a follow, check out my Linktree for socials and more, and share the episode with a friend who you think would get a lot out of it. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.